Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Lab's September monthly program. For those of you who don't know, my name is Robert Friedman. I'm the founder of Cannabis Lab Law, Accounting, and Business. We're a professional industry association for cannabis. Thank you all for attending. Tonight, we have a great program for you. Before we begin, I just want to go over a couple of news and notes. One, I want to thank tonight's sponsors, FLUENT Cannabis and DominionAG, both part of tonight's panel. Thank you for making our events possible and helping to grow the cannabis industry together. We do these events every month. For those of you who don't know, we encourage you to become members or get involved in sponsors or even reach out to us about educating, letting us know what are the important topics you want to hear from us. But we're here to be a resource for the industry. That's why we exist, why we do these programs. And so it's also why we're excited for the one tonight. We think we're always talking about what are the important topics, what are the issues in the industry. The one that's been in my ear lately from my friends and peers is, how are these big scales able to do it? How are they able to grow great cannabis? How are they able to compete with what these craft growers can do? How are they transitioning to these 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 square foot grows? It is all interesting to me. I always say, don't ask me. Let's get the experts on a panel and we can answer these questions together. So I'm not going to hold us up tonight. I know we have NFL football kicking off in a little while, so we're going to get things started. I'm going to introduce our host here. Without further ado, we are not related, but I would like to introduce you to the Director of Marketing for DominionAG, Todd Friedman. A little bit about Todd. Todd is a business and brand builder. He's an award-winning creative director. His career spans 25 years. You wouldn't know it by looking at that young face. And he's been working with brands in cannabis, finance, construction, all that to say he's well-versed in the issues of the industry and fit to lead this panel. Thank you, Todd Friedman. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Robert. We should be related, but thank you very much. Well, we have amazing panelists today, and I'm going to ask each question to one of the panelists to kick off the questions, and then we'll go from there. This is really a great opportunity for viewers to ask additional questions at the end of the discussion. And please ask us questions in the chat. And if we can't get to all of them, we can also follow up with your questions later. So I'm going to introduce the panelists. I'm going to start with, in alphabetical order here, we've got Jeff Lair. He's the Director of Architecture and Engineering at DAG. Jeff oversees the planning and engineering operation of cultivation facilities. He's responsible for the design and commissioning of over 150 facilities throughout North America. So he's got a lot of experience there. He's got a degree in industrial technology and applied engineering. Also on our panel, we have Marco Malatrasi. Did I say that right? He's the Director of Operations at FLUENT. And for 11 years, Marco has directed commercial horticultural operations across the globe. His emphasis is on productivity, profitability, and sustainability. And Marco specializes in large-scale cannabis production systems. He believes in delivering ecologically responsible solutions to every project, and he promotes the dual ethic of stewardship of earth and people. Also, we have Darrin Potter, who's the Vice President of Operations at Liberty Health Sciences. And Darrin's life has been dedicated to the cultivation of plants from the time he grew up. He grew up in field crop production, I believe, as a family business in Florida. He received his first award in science at the age of 13 for an agricultural observation submitted on soil science. And then he began in California's cannabis industry in 2007. And he now leads all cultivation efforts for Liberty Health Sciences, which is one of Florida's largest cannabis operators. Last but not least, we have Craig Schneider. He's the Vice President of Infrastructure and Enablement for Cresco Labs. He began as a technologist on the campus of Washington University, and he's built the school's emerging technology infrastructure and support systems, and specialists use his tech to aid their research in medicine, science, aerospace, architecture, communications, and public relations. Craig believes that great technology systems are simple, service-based, and geared towards helping others do their work better and easier. So thank you all for being a part of this. And we're going to just start off the questions here with kind of a fun one. and that is, what is the single coolest thing about the facilities you've worked at? Darrin, you want to start us off there?
Sure, absolutely. The single coolest thing about facilities I've worked at, well, I'm going to talk about Liberty Health Sciences, our Florida team. And honestly, the coolest thing about this place is the people that work here. I absolutely love them. I have an amazing team, and our culture is the dream culture that I've been looking for a long time. What attracted me here? I started in November of 2020. And one of the primary reasons that I took the position with the company is the fact that we have 300 acres, and the ability to expand our production footprint was the most appealing to me. So that was one of the coolest things. And there's really not just one. It's hard for me to say there's just one cool thing. I love our facility in the fact that it's a greenhouse, and it's a modified greenhouse. It's essentially hybridized. So we get to utilize, Mother Nature's greatest gift, the sun. For our micromole. Of course, we have supplemental lighting, but we also have the benefit of the indoor applications, in that we are, mechanically, we've invested a lot of money into creating a really good horticultural environment for the plant. So from a CO2 perspective, from a environmental control, temperature, relative humidity, we really have those capabilities to create high quality cannabis, which is the focus of our organization. So I would say those would be the primary coolest things to me that stand out, and why I took the role here.
Incredible. Anybody else want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I got to toot the image behind me. I think one of the coolest things that I've been involved with here at Fluent is just, getting to walk into a 6th level grow. Hadn't had that before. So from our utilization footprint, based on our actual parameters that we got in the space, we're very efficient in our use of space. That head height with the plants also allows for really efficient use on our grams per watt basis. In other words, I don't have to push light as far down to the plants. Of course, I can't use the benefits in that regard, but yeah, it's one of the things I gotta mention. It's been a trip, and really seeing the value of that and how to optimize that system's been a fun challenge.
Incredible. 6 levels. I see that behind you. Amazing. Okay.
I would weigh in. I'd double down on the people aspect of it. I mean, I know it's a very cliche answer, but having the advantage to travel around the country and merge with a lot of great companies out here who have brought so much internal knowledge and so many different and localized styles to the game has allowed us to kind of have an aggregate collective view of cultures around the country. And one of the probably the one unifying factor is the passion for the plant and the passion for helping people through it. It's, there is still that old, what some of the corporate newcomers might call a hippie aspect to it. But to me, it's my favorite and most motivating part of this business,
Yeah, it's an amazing community to be a part of. I really enjoy it myself. Anybody else want to chime in on the coolest thing?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit on besides working in the facilities, I've just traveled to a bunch of them. So I would say for mine, it's going to be the actual automation you see coming into all these facilities. Just having a controlled environment, controlled irrigation cycle, controlled recipes. It's one of the neatest things to see when you see it actually fully calibrated, turning into some type of reality. It's getting too hot in there, all of a sudden the fans kick on. In a greenhouse, the roof louvers may open up. It's just one of those neat things to see how far it's progressed.
Amazing. Yeah, buildings for plants. It's incredible. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. This next question is also for, we'll start it off with Jeff. What's the best way to approach your facility design, like from the very beginning?
I would say the biggest thing to do when approaching a facility is really to just plan ahead. I like the concept of don't try to fit all your equipment in your building, but rather to build your facility around your equipment. This way, you have the proper sizing for, say, your head house or water room, your benching fits. Everyone in the facility has room to move about, so forth. Almost as it'll help with the synergy of all your operations as well, from your cultivation team to your operations team, even down to your maintenance team. Everybody can work together once you have a building built for their actual needs and not try to work yourself into a building.
Excellent. Is there anybody else wants to, help out the people that are watching here that might be, building their facility, you know, what's the approach? What's the first step? What's the first thing you think of?
Yeah, I'll weigh in. This is Darrin.
Thanks, Darrin.
So the very first question that I typically ask of an investor or a group that wants to get into this space is essentially, who do you want to be when you grow up, right? Do you want to be the high quality flower producer? Do you want to be the low cost producer? So that really, you know, gives direction into what kind of facility you're going to design. The next question would really be, how much capital do you have? You know, what kind of investment are you looking to make into this? Because that is going to impact your grow significantly. And, you know, how many dispensaries do you want? That's going to have a lot to do with the size, right? If you're looking to feed 5 dispensaries or you're looking to feed 105 dispensaries, that's going to be a significant impact on your operational design from automation, as you pointed out earlier. So those are some key factors. You know, at AIR, we put a lot of money into infrastructure. We want to be a high quality cannabis producer. That is our focus. That's what we do. So we put a lot of capital investment into that. The other thing I would say is, a lot of times companies have growers that they're, you know, very married to, if you will, right? So they've invested in that grower. Maybe they've given them stock options or whatever the case. So in that case, you really want to design a facility around the capabilities of the grower. In the event they don't have a very sophisticated background, maybe they haven't used a lot of automation equipment, you want to tailor to those types of things as well, right?
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in on that best approach to
KISS principle. I think it's really important when designing your facilities to just keep it as simple as possible. I definitely agree with the early panelist about designing the building around your equipment. Don't try to jam your equipment into it. So envision the space that you want, envision enough growth for that space to accommodate future needs. But nooks, crannies, corners, clever design things, any ornamental architectural designs within greenhouses or grow houses. Remember, those all they take space, they take away grow room, they add compliance complexities for lines of sight from cameras. So the simpler the effective space you can arrive at, both the more inexpensive it'll be to build and the cheaper it'll be to maintain and operate and keep compliant.
Right. Excellent. And just as a side question that Darrin got me thinking is, are most companies that are, you know, in the industry today, are most of them designing to build to create the best cannabis, or is it the most cannabis? Like, what are you seeing in the industry as far as that? Or your company specifically, what are you looking to do?
Yeah, I'd love to chime in on that and just kind of build on what the other guys were talking about. You know, beyond designing for the infrastructure and the equipment that's going in there, there's also the question of ideal plant size. It's not a baseline that we all have different ideal plant sizes. I think it's important, to your point, Todd, to identify, you know, what's your final SKU or SKUs. What are those final products you intended to develop and drive? We're in a bit of a nascent market, at least speaking, Darrin and I, in regards to Florida. You know, it's a huge state. It's got a high population. There's a lot of folks that are on medical prescriptions that can benefit from cannabis, but we don't have the culture, if you will, that you find out west. So it's a mixture of developing the market, educating the market, and then designing for that. I would also add to what the guys were mentioning before was, I think every facility has a chronology in that approach. If you're looking at it from a market perspective, designing and building with modularity in mind and agility in mind as you develop and as the market expands, as you take market share, but also, you know, implementing that CapEx spend, that burn rate responsibly, and when it makes the most sense, I think can't be understated. So, you know, understanding that the facility in many ways is a living organism in and of itself, and it will go through probably several iterations. I'm sure we can all attest to that. And so you want to design and plan with that in mind.
It's best to understand your market and understand what your approach is to the market. So great. This one's directed at Craig. What's the biggest lesson you learned? And, you know, like the thing that people who are starting now in the business, what should they consider when designing or building their facility?
Yeah, I think a lot of, there's first of all, amazing amount of expertise collected on this panel. Good job, and it's impressive to hear some of the stories of these panelists. This is, I think, collectively they're responsible for about half the weed in the country. But I think that they'll probably agree. The biggest, when you give somebody, when you think about what we do, what we want to be when we grow up, to quote the other panelist, it's a dream come true for a lot of people to be able to work in this space, to be handed a considerable amount of CapEx and to say, go build your dream facility. That's a dream for a lot of us. And we tend to be a very creative people in this industry. And unfortunately, dreams can be hard to make reality. So I think it's very important for all the stakeholders that are going to be involved in a facility, is this just going to be a grow? Is this going to be a grow in kitchen? Is this going to be a grow kitchen extract lab? Whoever's the stakeholder, whoever's going to be involved in what that facility will hold, needs to sit down and hash it out and get their toys in a row before we start building. Because once we start, even minor changes can magnify. The movement of a pier, the movement of a kitchen, the ripple effects of those costs become astronomical really quickly. So I think to build an efficient facility, it's most important before you put a shovel in dirt or you take an axe to an old building and start the rehab. Know what your final vision looks like and strongly resist any late vision changes that might add to the aesthetics of the build, but don't really help you on the CapEx or operational side.
Yeah, I think we've all seen some of those planning issues happen, and that is certainly a major lesson learned. Does anybody else want to add to those lessons?
Yeah, Todd, I can tell you just from on the design aspect or construction aspect, pretty much just jumping off what Craig said, incorporating the entire team in something with your cultivator, your operations team, as well as mainly your maintenance team. I think it's one of the most forgotten things I've ever seen in facilities. I've been all over North America. I can tell you everyone last thought is maintenance, even though that should be one of the most upfront things, I think. Can your facility go down if a key piece of maintenance goes down? Who knows? Do you have a backup plan? Do you have extra plans on top of that? So with that, I also think space is your best friend in these facilities, especially in your head house, water room, whatever you want to call it. But do you have things? Can you move around your equipment? Can you get to your equipment easily? In your grow rooms, are you able to access your plants? If say some lights go out, can you move your benches properly? Can you get to your exhaust plants or all your exhaust fans? So it's things like that. A lot of people don't really think about in the upfront thing. They just want to grow, get their money back. But you really do have to think of the big picture, think of everything. How are we going to get our money back? How are we going to make money? And how are we going to keep making money? I think that's the biggest thing you can work on.
Excellent. Okay, so, there's a lot of new trends and fads that come out and that we hear in the industry. People start buzzing about the latest thing because it is a nascent industry and there's a lot of excitement. So is there something that's coming out in your, and this is open to, especially focused on Marco for this one from FLUENT. In your opinion, what's come out recently that you're like, stay away from that? That's not the way to go. Is there anything like that you could,
I don't want to get
not to come down on anybody,
Right.
but is there some things that you're seeing like that out there?
Yeah, I could think of a few, frankly, in life and the industry. In this industry, I'm seeing a lot of smart tech, which I don't mean to say is a fad and is going away. If anything, it's going to become more ubiquitous. But as awesome as a smart light is, for instance, with a host of sensors, I don't need a bunch of smart lights when I have a very robust horticultural computer system, let's say, with my own sensor suite. So I guess more modularity in the offerings in smart devices. I want a few dumb ones too, looking at that. You could even go into, from the input perspective, this industry's a bit famous or infamous regarding, snake oil and inputs and things that'll get you that next marginal increase, which can be, substantial. So in that regard, I see in a lot of our facilities, the mycorrhizal guys and things like that. And this is coming as somebody that's very passionate about arbuscular, endo, and endophytic mycorrhizae. In other words, you know, I definitely think it's a proponent in organic agriculture and peak phosphorus, all sorts of talking points. But at the end of the day, there's certain fixed values, which, like in other words, with this mycorrhizal, I'm giving chelated nutrients to the plant. The plant is smart. She's not going to trade a sugar for a service that she doesn't need with the arbuscules and the excess nutrients that the mycorrhizae can accommodate and give it to us. So I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, understanding that there are certain, even in the scope of design, you know, beyond fads, there's certain fixed laws of physics, of biology, that you don't need to pump critical money into critical infrastructure with appropriate design. You know, it's 3.41 BTU for every watt. So if I can take that inverter from my lights and put it out of the room, there's that much less cooling that I'm going to need. The head height on the plant, you know, the 80-90 absorption transpiration split. There's certain fixed values that we can work and design for. But yeah, you know, I think the UVC lights that I see for going over canopies and things like that, again, I don't see them as solving root cause issues. You know, they maybe reduce observable pathology, things like that. There's certain pieces out there I don't think are going to continue. Beyond fad, and I'm sorry to take a little bit here, but beyond fads, you know, I think one of the things that excites us all about being in this nascent industry is we're on the bleeding edge of development. There is no standardized way or practice yet. It's becoming apparent, but you know, even things like cloning versus seed, I think we're going to move away from that. When I look at my canopy space that you know, I'm utilizing for cuts, and I know maybe we're not there with the seed development yet with all the polyhybridized varieties we deal with. But point is, you know, it's future focused. It's my approach when I vet something. Is it dealing with a root cause? Is it dealing with a root issue? And is it future proof? Does it allow me to grow into it? Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's kind of like what Craig said earlier, is like, you know, get the basics right. A little bit of that too. So
I got some 2 cents there for sure.
Okay.
This is Darrin. You know, one of the things
Darrin?
ads I've seen is foliar application of CO2. That seems like something that's probably not going to take a lot of traction. And then the inner lights, the LED within your canopy, right? Putting it in the canopy. You know, you get plenty of light penetration with the sun. You know, I know Marco's using LEDs. He gets plenty of light penetration there. I've seen that grow. You know, so putting bulbs in the interior of your canopy, you know, aside from the concern of bulbs breaking, you know, things breaking, getting onto your flower, I definitely think those are fads you're going to see, you know, dissipate over time.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Craig, you're on mute. Okay, we got you.
Sorry. But the hazards of working off an iPhone. Sorry, team. It's really interesting to hear that perspective from the previous folks, because I think they explain both the nature of and the solution to a trend in the industry that I've been noticing, and that is too much technology, over technifying things that are by professional, you know, explanation, somewhat natural. Some things occur within natural boundaries, and to throw new and better and faster and sharper tech at a natural process, I think, is to get away from the subject matter experts who tell us what's going to help them. Actually published an article on this recently on LinkedIn about the importance of using technology as a tool to help in the process instead of a tool to replace the process. We need to remember that this is a flower that grows from the ground. There's a nature to it. Listen to the pros who grow it, use tech accordingly.
I'm really happy to hear that from a technology person. That's really nice.
could be a challenge.
Yeah, you know, I guess we can't solve everything with technology. Mother Nature still wins.
Todd, I think
Okay.
just to kind of like jump in on pretty much what everyone says, just from everything I've seen in this industry, without getting into nutrients or science of it all. I think this whole industry, you see a lot of times, it's keeping up with the Joneses. They want the biggest, baddest type of equipment they can have out there. You put one on site, you try to commission it. Then you ask, say, the grower or whoever bought it, like, hey, do you know what this thing does? And they're like, no, but the guy down the street I know uses it, and they make this kind of product. So that's one thing you want to look at. Always try to stick with like the things that you do know do work. say like ozone's great for your water sitting there, killing bacteria and stuff like that. Reclaim skids, do all these work. You can try and test them, but I always tell people, try to steer clear of these new products that just came out. Do you want your money doing the research and R&D on it and then may fail, or do you want something that's tried and true over time?
Stick with the tried and true to start off, huh? All right, so anybody else want to chime in before I move on? Okay, so very often I've heard cultivators are challenged growing on a large scale. This is a thing that's pervasive throughout the industry. I'm just going to ask the first part. Why is this so hard to scale for cultivators? For a lot of the cultivators that I've heard, why is it so hard for them to scale?
I'll take that. This is Darrin.
Okay, Darrin.
I'll be honest, I don't really think that it is hard to scale. I think that it's been challenging for, this industry's been growing exponentially fast. And the people with the skill set from a horticultural scale side, it's taken a while for them to transition into this market. It hasn't happened overnight. Out of fear, I have a lot of friends who grow mums or ornamentals, and for a long time they told me I was crazy for being in this sector, that I would ruin my horticultural career, right? But you're starting to see that transition over. So for a long time, you had hobbyist growers trying to scale hobbyist applications, and kind of to the point of the last question you asked about fads, they're very quick to jump to those fads, right? Very quick to jump to, what's going to get me an extra gram or whatever the case may be, right? So getting a grower from, let's call it the closet or 1,000 square foot room to 100,000 square foot and beyond, that's very difficult when you're taking hobbyist type, say like a hydrofarm table, right? A 4x4, and then trying to scale that to 100,000 square feet. It's not really feasible. Now, I've seen some people try it, and some people have been, somewhat successful, but that's been one of the really big challenges. And, really the capital investment that it takes to create and design a facility at 100,000 square feet for optimization of just utilizing that square footage efficiently, right? Maybe they don't have the operational understanding of how things flow, and really making sure you get a really good master design from the beginning, from the get-go, so you understand how that operational flow is going to go through your facility, instead of kind of shooting from the hip and, okay, I'm gonna build this room, now I'm gonna build this room, now I'm gonna build this room. And it's those are the challenges, right? So starting with a good, strong master plan, and I think what you're going to see, and what I try to do and have been doing for a number of years now, is trying to take the cannabis expertise, right? The guys who really know high quality flower, they love it, they live it, they've been living it for a long time. And then taking the guys who have, maybe been focusing on tomato production, right? And large scale horticulture production, but don't know really high quality flower, right? They're thinking of it from a biomass perspective, and getting those two to marry and learn from each other, and kind of what Marco was talking about earlier, the nuances of bringing that knowledge base together. That's been the challenge, right? That's one of the big challenges, and getting that horticultural knowledge and that cannabis knowledge to fuse. And from an infrastructure perspective, making the capital investment to design a facility from the get-go with the right mechanical, right? Irrigation, the right lighting, and not overcomplicating things. I think that's been the challenge over the years, and we're getting there. It's happening.
Excellent, thank you, Darrin. Anybody else want to chime in on why is it so hard, or how can a facility help a cultivator have more success? That's the second half of the question.
Yeah, I think I'll chime in real quick. I think defining what those key performance indicators are, defining the structure, defining the training programs, caring for not just plant, but people and culture. To Darrin's point, there's a tomato grower is going to look at the amount of air movement in one of our facilities and be like, well, no way. But, there's something, obviously, there's an interplay that goes on with that. So I think, though, the challenge is really that you're using unstabilized genetics. When you're talking from a MSO, multi-state operator perspective,
Right.
you know, what they're growing, the sour diesel they're growing up in New York is not my sour diesel here. So when I used to grow strawberries, if I had an Albion cultivar, a true cultivar, right, I could take that and grow it anywhere in the world, and I know those KPIs, right? I know those parameters I need to do. We don't have that with cannabis. So there is that element of tacit experience and knowledge, those cannabis guys and girls that have been growing, and what they can bring to the table and their familiarity. But yeah, at the end of the day, you're dealing with essentially unstabilized genetics and non-standardized methods of production. So you get a lot of he said, she said. You get a lot of, well, this works for me here and this works for me here. So to Darrin's point, you know, it's about leveraging that cannabis specific experience and then scalability experience. I think the horizon is in sight in regards to, in a couple years, you're going to find a lot more of those kind of operators that felt good about getting the technical training, official technical training, if you will, with the background and knowledge, talking to the professor, I'm going into cannabis, you know, or maybe that institution of higher learning had a cannabis program. So yeah, we've seen it. I'm sure everybody on this panel has seen over the last couple of years that deficit kind of shrinking down, and we're getting to a better place.
So there's kind of like a standardization of understanding that's happening. Does everybody see that across the board?
I think so.
I think that's a challenge from the MSO perspective because of the regionalism and the state by state nature of the market right now. You know, everybody has a unique way of doing things. The fine line walk there is, I think, from a technology, from an enabling the grower, the second part of your question, is to define, to key on those KPIs that were mentioned, and to listen and to say, what exactly are the 3, 5, 10, whatever aspects you're trying to express for. And then from a technology standpoint, there's a lot of things happening in the IoT world. There's a lot of data you can pick up now, from humidity to, you know, wind movement to things like that. The best enablement that I can apply now for growers is to be able to put as much of that information as possible in their hand or on a screen or on a dashboard, ideally literally from their phone, you know, where they can check a remote setting, check the conditions in a grow room. If something is not automatically adjusting a temperature, a humidity level, a light level, then to give them the opportunity to do it remotely, to make a tweak right then and there with all the key metrics and the KPIs they need to know, you know, to enforce the standard I want to enforce. This is how I'd like to do it. Now, from an MSO standpoint, those state level silos then become a measure of seeing what works best in each state and trying to get, you know, agreement among the states to find best practices and combine them all into one rolling forward thing that we can agree on, something like standardization from coast to coast. And I think for our company, we're very lucky to have very knowledgeable growers and a very dedicated team that's been able to do that. And we just use the tech that they asked for to try to help make that as easy as possible.
That's incredible. That's awesome. This is also a question for Craig. This may be a little ambiguous, Craig, but greenhouse or warehouse? What is it that, what are the key performance factors or the key factors that helps you decide, or what is your preference or your company's preference? Greenhouse or grow house, maybe.
Grow house, yeah.
Greenhouse or grow house.
You know, to kind of key on what I just said, and I'll speak briefly, and I'd like to open this to the other panelists, because the biological and the horticultural implications of both, you know, can be addressed from a variety of ways. To boil it down to a dumb person like me who doesn't have that science, basically, Rich Short, I think that the grow house lets you control more of your environment, definitely gives you that pinpoint control ability, because you are designing your own space to be your own clean room, you know, exactly as you want it. Right. The potential downside there is, as I've come to understand, is that microbes, infections, things that come into your clean room are then can spread rapidly and become more of a problem in an indoor grow room more rapidly than they would, you know, in a grow house or in a greenhouse rather. The advantages of the greenhouse, obviously climate dependent. If you can use nature to do the hard work for you, like you can down here in Florida, that's, you know, the folks that know the art and science of that's the natural approach. And terpenes are all the rage these days. There seems to be an understanding that natural sunlight helps express those terpene profiles a little more fully. In our experience, I think your region and again, what do you want to be when you grow up, to use that great phrase, what do you want to grow here? How much of it do you want to grow? How much control do you have over the environment? Those are the factors that I think are really the key points as you choose.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig. Anybody else want to chime in on this?
Yeah, Todd, I'll just jump in real quick, just from a mechanics type standpoint, not quite the cultivation side, but on the facility design, I always like obviously going into warehouses, seeing warehouses. I do feel that, you're going to get the same product pretty much out of it as whatever you put into it. Your set points will stay the same. As long as your automation keeps up and you keep up on your maintenance, as I was talking about before, everything should almost be redundant and happening over and over again. So you will get your same product. You can always make R&D rooms as well too, which will help you test out different styles of growing. With the greenhouse, obviously those are great as well, especially if money might be a factor. And Darrin talked about earlier having a hybrid type style, which I think is actually one of the greatest styles, because you can, especially based on your location. Obviously, if in the tundra, it might not work as well. But with the greenhouse, the only downside of that is, especially like I said, based on your location and then your set points and your sequence of operations to make all those things work, you have to go through all your seasons, assuming that your location does have seasons. And it can take up to almost 2 years for a grower to, calibrate exactly what they're trying to get into. So those are kind of the hurdles you get with that. The warehouse, like I said, once you start building and start growing and become trained on your automation as well too, that's a key one. Then I think you can kind of let it do its thing.
Okay. So I guess the overall is, does everybody agree that you have a little bit more control if it's all indoor warehouse? Is it more control that you're getting overall, or can you control a greenhouse as much as you can control a fully indoor facility? Does anybody?
Darrin, I definitely feel you can control an indoor, much more efficiently than you control a greenhouse, right? You have precipitation, relative humidity, the seasons, right? In a greenhouse, even with a highly automated greenhouse with mechanical controls, you're still going to have those nuances, right?
Right.
So preference wise, an indoor, a grow house is always going to be, once you've made the capital investment into it, you designed it well, it's going to be easier to operate. I will say, over time, as you see the race to the bottom occurring, and I'm talking about, 5, 10 plus years from now, you are going to see shifts towards those automated, greenhouses that, and this is my opinion, right, that are highly controlled, modified greenhouses, almost like quasi indoor with a paneled roof, right, to utilize the sun and capture those terpene profiles, etc. But I think we're a ways away from that. I think there's a strong place for indoor for quite some time.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
One last consideration there too is I agree, you do generally add that control, but remember, depending on your climate, one of the great advantages of the greenhouse approach is the less expensive, you don't need the expensive lights, you don't have that higher electric control bill. But when you start going north, the farther north and the colder you get, that can invert on you quickly to where you're now expending money and energy costs to keep those plants alive. So a lot of factors go into it, but regional, I think, is a key one.
That's the big factor. Also, this is something I'm going to open it up to the panel, to the questions in the chat. I see a few coming in now that I want to be able to ask, but I had a thought. This is kind of for me. And it kind of relates to the greenhouse idea. Is what I care about is energy efficiency. And I kind of feel like, what's going to happen in time as, the price is probably going to go down. And I think we all kind of understand that as we grow more, the prices are probably going to go down in cannabis. What are the key things that are being done now for energy efficiency in your facility? This is kind of a surprise question, but
I love it. I love surprises.
All right.
Well, I mentioned, I think earlier regarding by virtue of our somewhat fixed infrastructure that we have here, that was one of the things we thought, hey, we can really deliver a win here is our grams per watt, our usage. So, we're looking, for instance, in that limited head height, like I said, we're getting the lights closer to the plants. We're able to get more light penetration into the lower portions of the canopy as well. So I think judicious use of water, obviously, I think that's the next big push you'll see. in the industry. I know in California already, we've got, you know, the kilowatt hours and that whole efficiency metric that's starting to get put into play there. You know, you're seeing it in California, Chicago, and I'm sure several other states, a meritocracy, if you will, in the issuance of licenses. In other words, you're generating points or less points potentially if you have your efficiency measures in place. So, you know, I think it begets, a lot of us do drain to waste type systems, hydroponic systems, but again, from a scale perspective, it can work well in that regard. But, you know, if you're looking at those kind of reusables and captures and recirculatory systems, things like that, you know, I didn't mention on one of the first questions, I think you said, what was the coolest thing?
Yeah.
On in a grow in Denver, will remain unnamed. You know, what we were doing there was taking the wastewater out of the facility and using airlift pumps, which is a very low cost technology to move water, aerate water. We're taking that high salt, you know, high EC water that we were getting from the drain and waste, and we were growing Nanochlorolopsis algae. It's a mouthful, say it 5 times fast. And that was for biofuel production. That was the dream. You know, we come to find economies of scale. You need a biorefinery. It ended up being fish food at a local tilapia farm. But those were the kind of initiatives that I think we're gonna see more of in the near future.
Excellent. Anybody else want to add to that, or we want to move on? Okay, let's move on. All right. There's some questions coming in that look pretty interesting here. This is from Doug. In managing the cultivation aspect, what are the biggest recurring regulatory compliance issues you have to be mindful of, aside from the initial building requirements?
I could speak to non-plant specific ones, and that is in any facility. The states are, most states, some more than others, but all states have requirements about access controls, lines of sight, who can be where, especially at different phases of plant maturity. So a simple thing that you wouldn't think of much, but say you design a grow room and you have camera height set. Did you design those cameras to accommodate for the fact that your plants will grow between 2 and 4 to 5 feet tall? And will those sight lines then be interrupted by any of that growth? Will a gentle wind that's blowing through that room to keep the plants healthy, will that trigger motion sensors and cause other issues? Just factoring what the full mature plant cycle looks like, and just the physical natural impact that will have on the environment, to make sure that you back those cameras far enough away, you keep those sensor settings down tuned enough to not react to false positives, and to create grow rooms that give you the information you need, but don't become intrusive with a lot of, you know, technology tripping over itself.
Right. Anybody else want to answer that question for Doug?
Sure, I'll chime in.
Okay.
You know, and I think I'm with DOH, it feels like every week. I have an inspection all the time. But that said, you know, when you're at scale and you're growing, you know, let's call it a couple 100,000 plants, and you're moving anywhere between 20,000 plants a week from one phase to the next, and you're doing it from veg to flower, right? Or nursery to veg, or clone to nursery, et cetera. You know, from a compliance standpoint, and this happened to me in Colorado circa 2013. And the director at the time came in, and we're doing new technology with metrics and wanding everything from an RFID, from a little wand he had on his arm, you know, making absolute sure your inventory control is, you know, priceless, right? It has to, everything moves, and everything has to move on a very regular basis, and making sure you're barcoding or RFID scanning. And when you move those into position, that's probably something you really want to be focused on from a compliance perspective in regard to moving plants. You know, you never want to be in a situation where a system went down, or the system, the inventory control system we're using, didn't capture that data and move it to the room, and then an inspector comes in, and you know, it's either caught in the process, or maybe it moved but it hasn't moved in the system, you know, moved physically. So those are things you really got to take into account, and you know, making sure every plant's barcoded, every plant's scanned, and every plant moves efficiently, and you have a really robust inventory control system. Those are things that from a compliance perspective and a plant perspective, I take very serious.
Yeah, the tracking is a very big issue.
I'd just add to that. Sorry, Todd, I just want to say another big one in compliance that consistently comes up beyond cameras. That's a great one. Is really just your process, and defining. And I think in a lot of states, you're finding the compliance body, the regulating body is probably has just recently, no matter where you're watching this from, has probably recently just become fully staffed. And you're now getting a lot more of those visits, and those visits are, asking about the process a little bit more. Their eyes have now taken in all your camera coverage and, your exits and all that kind of stuff. And now it becomes your process. They are observing what you're doing in action, and, oh, where's that work instruction? Where's that SOP? So it's really important to have a robust, quality assurance system within the facility to kind of make sure that chain of custody, those documentations and everything is up to date and audit ready all the time. That's one of our our themes here. So
Are you guys getting attacked a lot? Is this really a constant thing that you're feeling? A lot.
I'll let Darrin speak to that. I think, some of the bigger players in the state, of which Florida has a few. Yeah, there's a couple of us. I would probably Darrin. I'll give Darrin the floor. They're making a lot of the press. They're making a lot of the regulation. They're working with us. A lot of these regulatory bodies work with the MSOs, with the operations. But yeah, it means there's a lot of visits.
A lot of it.
Yeah, you have to
Are
imagine.
they friendly visits, or are they, not so friendly?
I had a visit today as an example, right? And it's regular. It's almost quarterly at this point, but you have to imagine, it's a new industry. So Florida, as an example, just dropped a number of emergency rules. And anytime those rules come into play, we have to modify our process to some degree, right?
Right.
Whether it's a new product, whether it's a new process, right? So those are things we have to take into consideration. They're coming in and they're learning as well. You have to remember, a lot of the regulators, they don't know this industry backwards and forwards. They know the rules as they're written, and that's their job to enforce them. So there's a lot of teaching back and forth, right?
Right.
And we literally do it all the time. So it's part of the process, part of the growing pains.
It can't stress that relationship aspect enough. Just as, I really want to second that aspect of the collaborative co-learning process. We've been in states where state troopers will show up that were just recently assigned to a new enforcement division, and they're as new as this as a lot of our folks are. So we've found good practice in just as open, honest, transparent communications with enforcement regulation folks. They're not your friends. They're there to do a job, but an honest approach to them as a learning and collaborative process, and in that spirit of this is a new industry that we're all still learning to navigate through, really yields what good results. It's better than a combative or a concealing attempt to try to cover inefficiencies. It's just a straightforward approach. Work with the regulators, and that's the best foot forward on that. It's there's not a lot of ways to hide in this industry. You got to be pretty transparent if you want to do it at scale. So work openly with the people that are going to be on the other side of enforcing that.
Okay.
One last thing, Todd, I got to say it. I got to add it. Safety, OSHA safety, right? OSHA compliance. You have
Safety first.
safety first.
You're
right?
an Eagle
Protect your
Scout, right,
people.
Darrin?
I am an Eagle Scout, and
It's
safety first. Man. You got to protect your people. You got to protect what your most valuable asset. So OSHA, being mindful of OSHA compliance, just for all the people listening on the call, keep that in mind when you're designing a facility and making sure that you're not, putting people in harm's way. So we take that very serious. Had to add it.
Okay, this question is Florida related. I think this is kind of interesting. From Karina. Cannabis cultivation facilities is the most valuable asset to any cannabis company. How can facilities prepare to be natural disaster ready from state to state? Like in Florida, we have, hurricanes. Is there a different approach to any other building, or, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I've been working in a lot of the subtropical regions for a little while, and monsoonal season and just the amounts of humidity, as well as actual tropical storm force winds or hurricane force winds, typhoons. you know, beyond the system and I love Darrin mentioning about the safety aspect. I think, you know, you have to look at escalation protocols, different levels for response to different events. I think though, you know, one of the things that I love about Fluent and their approach to precisely that threat, if you will, to mitigate risk is multiple facilities, you know, not one large campus, but multiple satellites, regional, and then you can take that into servicing and distribution and all the benefits, ancillary benefits you get from that. But fundamentally, you know, you got a pest outbreak, or you got again, a storm, something comes in, knocks out a piece of critical infrastructure. You're not hamstrung, so to speak. You've got your other units contributing to that. So I'd say bar high level, that would probably be the first one. Besides your EAP, your emergency action planning, is chiefly, you know, spread out the risk as much as you can responsibly.
So Marco, you don't agree with 500,000 square foot facilities?
I knew you'd get me. Merits to both. Everything's a pro con, and you know, similar to what earlier, you know, and I think it's one of these questions coming up, but it's all about your vision. There's a trifecta, similar to what Darrin said. I do the same thing with a client. What's your vision? What's your location? What's your budget? Within that triangle, I can help develop a facility, a production plan for you. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just saying, you know, from that perspective, spreading out the risk a little bit. I'm sure you could do that on a big campus with multiple rooms and physical barriers, things like that. But yeah, geographically, putting a little distance between your different operating sites is, you know, it can be a challenge as well, operationally. But from the storm perspective, it's
maybe not everybody has the luxury of building multiple facilities too. That's, you know,
Yeah.
so maybe don't build in a hurricane zone.
You know, from an MSO standpoint, we are, whether we choose to be or not, we're geographically dispersed, and that comes with, you know, dispersed threats, which down here we have the hurricanes in Florida, where I am now with these folks. Out west, we've got wildfire risks where facilities have been impacted to the point of evacuation in some cases from smoke hazard. Up north, obviously snow, things like that. Urban areas, city areas, we've had some civic unrest that has impacted on operations. To try to mitigate that against that, Cresco's recently hired a really good, experienced, you know, risk management person who is in charge of disaster planning, disaster preparedness, things along those lines, to not just to protect your operations, but to go back to the OSHA point about what's the most important thing that you have, the health and safety of folks in facilities and how it can be impacted by everything from COVID to a wildfire, to a hurricane, a flood, etc. Those plans need to be made. You need to remember how to protect your core assets when those type of things happen, and it's not the weed in your greenhouses.
Exactly. I'm going to ask
Todd, I was going to just,
thank you,
yeah,
Jeff.
sorry, Jeff again. Just going to just jump in on just one extra little thing I was thinking about. I mean, if you do have a sole greenhouse or sole warehouse and you don't have the finances to build multiple, obviously you could go smaller than larger, but it's also just having a secondary power source as well too. I've been to a lot of places where they don't have a generator on site, or they don't have, you know, even if it's a secondary or sustainable type of energy from outside off the main power grid, something that can keep your facility afloat if there is some type of power outage. And it's not just, you know, it could be anything really hurricane related, or even just, you know, the grid going down, something like that. So it's always good to have a backup plan just for your electricity as well.
That's better in a smaller facility, I would assume.
I would second that, by the way.
Yeah.
The person who's lived through it.
Yeah.
Levels of
Yeah.
redundancy. I think that's the
2017 Irma. Yeah.
I've been through a few. This is from Donald. What do you all look for in a vendor on the professional services side, on the equipment systems side, when you're planning and building your facilities? You know, this might be someone in the industry here. You know, what are the keys that help you decide on a good vendor?
I think, especially at scale, cost is important. Your CapEx and your OpEx considerations are going to drive the reality of any business, especially a corporate one. That has to be critical, you know. But after that, after we've negotiated prices and we've negotiated acceptable terms, I jump immediately out of the tech space and out of the budget space and start looking for people. this industry moves really, really quickly and requires pivots frequently, and business partners who understand that are willing to flex with you. I've got partners that I have become personal friends with as vendors because we've been together so long, and their dedication and professionalism has been so impressive. But they share with me that it's one of the most challenging industries that they work in, perhaps the most challenging when they come from other service sectors because of those issues, the state-by-state silos, the challenge with standardization, the fluidity of the industry. All of those things call for, hey, we needed you in this state today at 1 o'clock, but that changed. I need you at this state tonight at 9 o'clock. And folks that are willing and able to, and enthusiastic about playing along with that opportunity and that kind of growth rate, that's critical. Those relationships are going to be critical, and you're going to rely on those people to help you out. And it's good to have somebody you can sit down and have a dinner with and enjoy their company and count on, because those relationships will matter.
That's great to hear. Anybody else want to chime in there?
Yeah, I always look at how many years they've been operating, right? You have a lot of industries popping up, a lot of companies popping up overnight in this industry. So, I look towards horticultural companies typically when it comes to, growing. How long have they been in the industry, horticultural industry? And then also the SLA, right? The service level agreement. That's really, really important to me. After I purchase a piece of equipment, what kind of service agreement, what kind of service plan do we have? I don't want to purchase something and then, all of a sudden it's like, thanks, bye, see you later. By the way, my light company went out of business and I'll never be able to replace your light again, as an example. I've definitely seen things like that happen. So those types of services just, paramount.
All right.
Todd, can I jump in there too, just on that? I think another big one, obviously combining both them of, service agreements, the history of the company. It's not always based on price points. I think in my mind of, because you do see some sites, I want the cheapest, I want the cheapest bid, the cheapest offer. Like if it's a higher price, is it reputation based, which I believe this whole industry is pretty much about. If you sell a bad product, if you have bad service, you're probably not going to stay in business that long. Everyone talks to each other in this industry. So that's kind of a big thing to look about. The history, as Darrin mentioned, just have they proved themselves in the past? The other thing I talked about before, keeping up the Joneses. It's not always about, the biggest, best, but how great is the actual product?
Thank you, Jeff. I think we probably have time for one more. It's almost the top of the hour here. A friend of yours is planning a facility. In one sentence, what advice do you give him? That's hard. I know, one sentence, but what do you tell him?
Know what you're building before you start.
Plan. I'm hearing
Plan. Negotiate the space. Have the arguments between the kitchen and the lab. Whatever's going to be discussed, debated, horse traded, horse swapped, space given or taken. Have the handshake agreements in place and the contract signed and done before you put a shovel in the ground. Because at that point, every day in the construction makes changes exponentially more expensive. So do yourself and your teams and your construction people and everyone else a favor and know what you want to build before you start.
Yeah, I'd second that. Master plan, that's what we call it. Make sure you develop your master plan. And when you do, make sure that you're designing for product flow, right? Efficiency, not just, I want this size kitchen, I want this. Make sure that it feeds into your end product. That is crucial in developing an efficient grow and making sure you're reducing the steps for your employees, right? Reducing the steps that you have to take to get from point A to point B.
I agree with both these guys. I think we're all saying the same thing here, where mine would just be don't focus on short-term profits, but kind of have the patience and plan for a better facility. All the time you cut corners in the front, you're just going to add time and money in the long run.
Excellent. I think that might be a great note to end on. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about their company or what's going on? I'm gonna give you.
Well, I think if it's my friend that I'm saying this sentence to, I'm asking him, does he know what he's getting into? First and foremost. But everybody had great answers. Defining the timelines, the SKUs. I think maybe being conservative with that burn rate, and then building the team. You know, we've all talked about our greatest asset being personnel. I think having a robust system in place to continuously improve not only process but people. You know, Kaizen, whatever you modality you want to approach with, but I think that's a huge and important piece, is the culture that you bring, culture of how you do things, and then the vibe.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think this has been an incredible session. I've learned a whole lot being with you guys. It's great to be with such a great group of panelists. But everybody's busy, and I know that. So I wanted to thank all of you for being a part of this. This has been very enlightening. There's some more questions coming in, but you know, we can hopefully follow up and make sure that every question's answered. But we're running out of time, and yeah, a lot of people are just saying, you know, thank you. This was really awesome. This was it's great to work with people with so much experience and you know, and talent in the industry. It's definitely an inspiration. So thanks again, and everybody have a great what is it, Thursday night? I'm all thrown off because of the week.
It is, it's football time.
It's time for football. My goodness. All right. Well, everybody have a great Thursday night, and really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
guys.
you for having us.
Thanks, Todd.
Great-
Thank you.
great
See you
panel.
later.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.